just want to say, starting out, that by blinking your eyes, you have indemnified me to any and all legal problems that may occur. If you lose a face, I'm sorry. I really am. But before we fly it around, I'm going to torture you for just a few more minutes. I want to show you what I have in my hand is essentially a $500 constitutional challenge in a box. The DJI Phantoms, actually this is a Phantom 1, you can get them as low as $350 now. You throw a GoPro on there, you have a pretty great platform for video and photos. The problem is you have a really great platform for videos and photos in something that you can go buy off the internet. Now, if you are sitting there and you realize, hey, I have any one of the hundreds of used Apple products staring back at me. I have a credit card. We have internet access. I'm going to go buy one of these. Slow your roll. Let's talk about this for just a moment. These are presenting all kinds of really interesting problems for journalists, for federal aviation regulators, for state legislators, and unfortunately, I think the next 5 years are going to be some of the most litigious that we're going to see in terms of new journalism tools. And it's somewhat fantastic that I'm doing this in the state of Texas, because I would like to welcome you to ground zero for the first constitutional challenge that will emerge from drones. Last legislative session, the great state of Texas, in its infinite wisdom, decided to pass a law, and its governor, Rick Perry, signed it into law, that if you have one of these and you fly it more than 8 feet in the air, which I go about 6'1", my arms are not that long, but really about higher than this. Anywhere higher than this, and you take a photograph of somebody and their private property, or their private property without their consent, and you post that photo on the internet, or you distribute it in some way, guess what? You've just committed a misdemeanor crime. So, if I take this device outside, I go on the other side of the river to an open piece of ground, and I take off and I fly to just 10 feet, and I take a picture toward downtown, a picture I'm sure the Statesman has taken 1,000 times this year, a picture that has been taken tens of thousands of times before, just of skyscrapers. If I wish to use that photo from this, I now have to get consent from every visible building landowner in the picture. As a journalist, yep. As a private citizen, yep. But, thanks to effective lobbying, if I am a real estate broker, nope, I'm good. I'm fine. If I am an oil and gas pipeline owner, fly on, have a good time. But if I'm a journalist covering an oil and gas pipeline explosion, I am committing a crime by using these. I am not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be one, but I have lots of friends who are, and they're like, no, that's not going to stand. Actually, I get phone calls fairly regularly from lawyer friends who are like, will you please go down to Texas and get arrested? And I'm at a stage in my life where I'm sitting there going, I could do that. My wife would be pretty pissed at me, but I'm not going to get fired. In fact, my employer would probably think that's pretty great. God, I love academia. Go get arrested, man. It's fine. So, because basically the first person who gets arrested under this, it's going to end up as a court challenge, and this law is going down. I'm fairly confident. The problem is that state legislatures seem to be basically a grown-up version of high schools. And so there's a fad going around now of other states getting into this business of trying to regulate drones in advance of the FAA. And we haven't even gotten to the FAA yet. Georgia literally copied and pasted Texas's law and introduced it. They made one change, one. Texas law has 19 exemptions to the it's illegal to photograph from a drone. 19. Georgia only has 18. The difference is that Texas makes it completely legal to fly drones and photograph whatever you want within 25 miles of the border. Georgia doesn't have that problem. I mean, unless it's with Florida, which, you know, totally understand. I would monitor the border with Florida myself. Copied and pasted, word for word. 4 other states are considering laws. The most current one is in Washington, where that law has been passed by the legislature. It's sitting on the governor's desk. It too has some constitutional dubiousness to it. If you are in a state here in the U.S. and you are interested in using these things, you should be watching your state's legislature. They are moving far faster than the FAA, far faster. And they are doing things that appear to be fairly hostile to the First Amendment. Now, I say that, First Amendment. I have a lot of journalist friends who want to tell me that I have an absolute, unfettered, unquestioned First Amendment right to use these. And my immediate answer is no, you're wrong. You don't. And here in a second, when we turn it on, you'll understand why. This thing right here is the modern robotic equivalent of shouting fire in a crowded theater. Constitutional limits to free speech generally are okay when there is a public safety, public safety reason behind it. That reasonable place and time restrictions are permissible. And with these blades, if you come up here afterwards and just kind of rub your finger on them, you'll realize pretty quickly they're sharp. And when I turn it on, they're going to spin really fast. Fast enough that if I were to put my finger down in it, I might not get it back. I might go home with 9 fingers. And I believe we call that bad where I come from. They crash. They crash fairly regularly. It's not always the pilot's fault, but as someone who's crashed many of these, it's often the pilot's fault. There is a significant safety concern here, and actually Tim and I were talking about this last night, that a lot of times when he's at these protests, there are so many people around, it's not safe to try to launch one of these drones. There's too many people. If something were to go wrong, someone's going to get hurt. And you don't want that on your conscience. You don't want that. So I may joke that you have all indemnified me by blinking your eyes, but I'm going to try very, very hard not to mutilate you in some horrific fashion. It's not only a bad idea, it's pretty career limiting. So that's the issue the FAA is actually most concerned about. They're probably overly concerned with safety of people in the air. They're worried about knuckleheads crashing these into United Airlines flights. And I'm here to argue that that's not even close to what we should be concerned about. It's actually people on the ground. These things fly low. The cameras that we generally put on these things, you don't want to go way, way, way up high and intermingle in the same air as Delta or United or US Air or whoever. You want to stay low. In that case, I get asked every day, almost, when are you going to go cover a Husker football game? A few of those who are unfamiliar, we at the Harvard of the Plains, we have a small intimate gathering on Saturdays in the fall. 90,000 of my closest friends, we get together, we cheer on our young lads. We sort of care about it. People ask me all the time, when are you going to go fly over that crowd? When are you going to cover a football game with them? And I said, you know, I'm not going to do it until I can be pretty sure that I'm not going to injure one of my 90,000 closest friends. The FAA is concerned about that, but the FAA is also losing ground on actually getting to regulate these things. The FAA is is supposed to have proposed rules a long time ago, and they keep delaying, they keep delaying, they keep delaying. At the same time, technology like this becomes more and more available. Outside, with GPS assistance on this thing is cake to fly. If we wanted to go and have a drone boot camp, I can get you pretty good on flying these things outside with the GPS controls. 3 hours, 4 hours, tops. You could be doing journalism with these things midday. Maybe we stop for lunch, maybe we don't. They're really good, and they're really cheap. And the longer the FAA waits, the less people are going to stand around and just go, no, okay, we'll wait for you to come up with rules. It's already happening. 2 times within a week in New York, citizen journalists grabbed these things. There was a building collapse in East Harlem, and they went and took off and flew over it with camera. And I'm just going to do this real quick. There we go. Everybody wave. And they went and they flew over this building collapse, and they got pretty amazing photos, and they got some amazing things that helped the story. A week later, there was a fire at a recycling plant. Somebody did that. They weren't journalists. The FAA has taken a very dim view and indeed are investigating these folks, dubiously, but that's a story for another time. There are no real rules on how to use these. There are no safety standards. There are no licensing standards. There's no insurance requirements. There's no nothing. You can buy these off the internet, be in the air within the afternoon, out you go. That's not a situation that can continue. We're going to need rules of the road, or someone's going to get hurt. And I'll show you in just a very brief demonstration of how this is both wonderful and semi-terrifying all at the same time. So I unlock the rotors, and they're just spinning at a kind of a steady state. And off we go. And I love high ceilings. If y'all are a little warm, I got you covered. Because when the fans get going, you'll feel it. Now, if I'm outside, this thing is actually much easier and safer to fly because the GPS would be helping me out. In here, it's all my controls. So those of you in the front rows here, you should be a little bit nervous. So you can see right away why this might be interesting. If there's a building on fire in front of me, if we're at a scene of a tornado that's just wiped out a town, if we're covering a hurricane in Florida, we've got a pretty ideal platform for some pretty unique views on this. If we were outside, I'm not only a criminal in the state of Texas, the FAA is going to be sending me little nasty notes. I have one. I didn't bring it with me. I should have. But you can see, you can hear it. If I go like this, bad news. First rule of safe drone flight is nobody dies. Let me just make sure this thing's not going to fly off on its own, but
has it ever flown off on its own before?
This one has not. We have others that have had a mind of its own before. We have one that's actually on the bottom of the Platte River right now because it decided to commit seppuku. But actually, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It went and it detected an electrical anomaly on board, and it decided to go into an emergency set down, and it just decided to sit down in the middle of a river. So it's a very dumb, smart technology.